Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, September 12th regular school board meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Mr. Estheimer? Do we know if he's coming?
He'll be late.
Oh, he's going to be a little late.
Okay.
He's excused for that.
Mr. Freitas?
Here.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Koopser?
Here.
Ms. Reed?
Present.
Dr. Pomponio?
Here. Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our mission statement is Learning for Life. Our vision statement is Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Are there any revisions or approval of the agenda? Okay, I'd like to remove item work session 3, Finance Committee status. We're going to move that to another meeting date.
Madam President?
Mr. Koopser?
I would like to add something to the work items.
Okay.
As it relates to branding standards for the district.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Branding standards?
What?
Branding standards.
So that'll be number 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and there's also an addition for presentations. We have a presentation by Mr. Jerry Morin. Did I say that right? Okay, thanks. Okay, seeing these 3 revisions, can I have a motion, or I'd like to make a motion to approve the revised agenda?
Madam President, I make a motion to approve the revised agenda as stated. Support.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Green and support by Mr. Craig. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to citizen comments, or any citizen comments? Seeing none, moving on to presentations, Mr. Morin.
Hi, well, it's my pleasure, as part of my position, one of the great things I get to do is introduce our new hires to the school board. Today, I'd like to introduce Danielle Misovich. She's a new science teacher at Anderson High School. Danielle?
Hello, everyone. I am Danielle Misovich. I am teaching biology and chemistry at Anderson High School. It's funny I say Southgate High School, and people are like, oh, what school in Southgate? I'm like, Anderson, sorry. So I am new here. I'm excited to start my career. I graduated from Grand Valley State this spring, so I'm very fresh teacher. Some of my experiences at Grand Rapids Public Schools, I've worked at, what is it called? UPrep, which is University Preparatory Academy of Grand Rapids High School, big name. And then I also worked at some of their elementary schools there as like a reading interventionist randomly, but I liked working with little kids too on the side job when I was teacher assisting. And then I was at Coopersville High School, also on the west side, for my student teaching placement. And I feel like I learned a lot there, and I'm excited to bring everything here. And I also have a lot of cool mentors I've met through the department already, and a lot of nice people at Southgate. So that is all.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
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 Nice to meet you.
Hi. Welcome. Thank you.
All right, that's all I had. I did have another new hire I wanted to introduce tonight, but he was unavailable to come to tonight's board meeting. I'm hoping to bring him to the next board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to committee reports. Anti-bullying, we are going to reschedule that. Finance?
There was a finance committee that was scheduled as of August 26th, in that we discussed whether or not we were going to continue to have that. That was removed from the agenda this meeting, and the work session, I'm expecting that to be addressed on the next one. At this point, we don't have any finance committees scheduled indefinitely.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to policy. We started working on the review of 3 separate policies, the committee agenda and policy for logos. So that's a work in progress. We might meet before the end of the month on this, but this should be completed, the policies that we're currently working on, by the beginning of next month. So that's all I have for that. Legislative?
Currently, there isn't any meeting established, so I will let the board president know to have that posted when the next meeting will be.
Thank you. Curriculum? There isn't anything to report there. Personnel?
We, due to the fact that Mr. S. Timer cannot meet today, we rescheduled the meeting for next month. I talked to Jerry this morning, or early this afternoon, and we had went over some things and decided there's really not much on the agenda as we're starting into the school year. So we will reconvene in October at a date to be determined.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President?
Mr. Coopson?
I know it's not part of committee reports, but it's related to. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. As it relates to the committee reports, and all committees, as they are open meeting acts, have to have posted agendas as well as the meeting minutes noted to it. I was digging around on the website and I couldn't see my finance committee meeting minutes that were on there, nor agendas. Did I not send them to the right person, or how does that get posted? I was curious.
You have to send them to me.
Send them to
So
you?
You've been sending them?
I've been sending them to the committee members, but I didn't realize I needed to send it to you.
If they
So
don't come to me, I can't download them into my computer and upload them onto the website. So if you
I'll
just
I'll send an
me-
email with all the attachments for it.
Yeah, whenever you send something out to your committee, just CC me on it, and then as soon as I see it, or minutes, then I'll do what I have to do and get it right on that site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Grounds and maintenance, there isn't anything to report on that, so we're going to move to discussion. Finance, Mrs. McLaughlin.
Still working on year-end things and getting the new year started. I just did want to mention that the budget report that I normally have been including on the first meeting of the month with the check register is not included this month. It would have been, the reconciled activity would have been as of the end of July, and with the revenue and expenditures that we are required to, that get paid in July and August, that are actually required to be put back into the prior year, and the timing of the reversals that we do, really July and August should be together. So the next report will be at the beginning of October, which will be year-to-date for July and August. And in lieu of additional reports tonight, the Cabinet is going to go over our 5-year plan, which is our current working document.
Well, you're going to be talking about all of this, like we did at ad staff.
So I gave all of you a printed copy, and this is also in the Google Drive as it comes up. I've referenced a few times in the last couple of months the 5-year plan, and this is an ongoing document that the administrative team has developed to make sure that we're matching the work that we're required to do, as well as our district and building initiatives, to also mesh with our strategic planning. So you'll notice that some of the cells are blank. Some of these things we don't know yet what will be required of us, if anything, going forward. So we're just gonna, this is just sort of a broad overview of some of the items that we have placed into the 5-year plan. This is a standing agenda item for our administrative staff meetings that occur at least once a month, and also include some professional development for the administrators in the district. So the first one is referencing Illuminate, and I'm going to let Jill describe that just a little bit, and then we'll talk about what work we're doing in there.
So Illuminate is the online system that collects both standardized test scores and pre and post data, so teachers can put tests on the system. We can do it from the district. We have, for example, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade math benchmark tests that are given online to students, and then the data is housed there. So last fall, we gave the teachers the information that this year we would be requiring them to use this system to put their pre and post data. Many teachers are using something called student growth, average student growth, and we're trying to get them to use tiered student growth, and they need 3 years of data or information to do that. So this is a place for them to house that data.
So for the current school year, all teachers are required to put their pre and post test data in for the large assessments that they're using for their student growth information. By next year, they'll be required to put all of their summative assessments in there, and then the following year, all formative assessments. And again, that's the goal is to make sure that we have the 3 years of data that would help them do use the tiered growth model, and we'll talk about that a little bit later coming down. So the next one is our multi-tiered system of supports, and also the 3rd grade reading law that seem to go hand in hand for us now. In previous years, the MTSS would have been referred to as RTI, and again, I'm going to let Jill talk about this one.
So due to the legislation that I've talked to you before about the 3rd grade reading requirements, in order to be more systematic, to help look at district data from a more district global standpoint, I will be running the multi-tiered system of support meetings at every building. When I go to the buildings, there'll be 2 subs involved so that teachers can attend and have someone to cover in their classroom while we're talking about student needs around intervention and other services. The students beginning on Monday will be taking one of the MDE assessments, and that is going to be the MDE Early Literacy and Mathematics Assessment. So I've been meeting with the K-1-2 teachers this week and giving them their test prep and the information, and we start on Monday with that test. So.
And for the next year, we do have many supports at the secondary level, but they're not written into the same kind of formal model as they are for K-5. So the goal for 18-19 would be to fully develop that model and to have a full complement of Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So by 2019-20, K-12 MTSS would be fully implemented, and then we would be monitoring that. The student growth, that is currently the 25% that is required as part of the teacher evaluations, and that's the multiple measures of successful learning. And again, we mentioned the fact that right now we require a simple growth model. We're beginning to move toward tiered growth, but teachers have to have 3 years of reliable data. And so right now we're calling this tiered growth awareness. We have some teachers who have 3 years of data, and everybody has had some exposure to the tiered growth model, and we will be providing extra training and support to teachers as needed. By next year, the state will require that 40% of the teacher evaluations be based on student growth. Half of that will be based on state assessments. We have no idea how that's going to work yet. And the other half will be local. The other cells we've not populated yet because we really don't know what additional guidance the state might give us for student growth. In the area of evaluations, we have completed year 1 of the training to the 5D plus model. All of our other non-5D staff, our social workers, psychologists, counselors, those people, they all have separate rubrics, but they don't fall under the category of the 5D plus. So for this year, the district based on the needs of the teachers, and we were able to run some pretty nice reports at the end of the year that compiled all of our observation information. We were able to determine a district area of focus on purpose. We have eliminated the data walks because we're now able to replace those with the reports that we can pull from Pivot that are based on the areas of focus from the 5D. In a couple of weeks, the administrators are having a rate of reliability training, and we have added a metric, which is a measurable goal worth 25% for the non-teacher evaluation. So everybody now has the measurable goal plus the 75% from their rubric. Our plans for the future years are just to continue to monitor the implementation and determine new areas of focus for the district. I'll let you take the next one.
So next is curriculum and Atlas Rubicon, and that what you see there is the 5-year plan that has been approved by the Board of Education Curriculum Committee as far as what areas we're going to make sure are on Atlas Rubicon and or looking at purchasing materials for. So for example, when you see ELA 6-8 in the 2018-19 school year, their books are the oldest textbooks along with the 6-8, and so we're going to be looking at what the textbook adoption might look like, if we can afford it, and of course all of those major purchases will come before the board for final approval. So.
Sure, if you want to
talk loud. So the toolkit MDE requirement is coming from special education. There are 14 state performance indicators that we're monitored on, and one of that, and we're also monitored by race and gender. And for this, we were found to have a high rate of suspension for African American males. So we've gone into a toolkit. It's a 3-year plan to improve our suspensions. So the first thing we did, what we did last year is we spent the last year looking at the procedures that we currently have in place, and we found that we needed to align some of the procedures between different buildings. So we're actually using this toolkit to try to reduce suspensions across all of the district, because the general consensus was that the more kids are out of school, the less they're going to learn. So from that toolkit, we're looking at this year exploring if there is a cultural or gender bias. We did also find, even though we weren't found on it, that we have a much higher rate of suspension of males than females. I know that probably doesn't shock people, but we're looking at looking at a new perception survey, which is going to be part of the early panorama. We're going to talk about a little bit later. We're analyzing the discipline data by building, and we're doing social emotional learning assessments, and we're going to be training the principals and staff on de-escalation training, how to calm down if a student is upset. This is a 3-year plan. We started last year, so the next year we'll be moving into much more focused. This will also coordinate with our early intervention services later. And the team, I should say the toolkit team, is actually made up of administrators across all of the building levels, from Asher High School, middle school, and elementary school.
So that leads us to the coordinated early intervening services, and this was also a finding where we were required to take a percentage of our special education funding and move it into a general education early intervention service. That is the addition of there are now 2 K-5 general education social workers, and we've started the planning for that for this year. We have purchased the Panorama, which is the social emotional learning survey information. It provides pretty essential information for classroom teachers and all of our support personnel, and it's accompanied by a playbook, which is an enormous resource of classroom interventions, classroom lessons, supportive ideas that we will begin. We're beginning implementation of that for K-5. The plan is to, we have for the following year to roll it out for 6-12, but we actually have already made plans to start exposing 6-12 to those materials materials and resources by January of this year. This is a one-year requirement, but because it was the result of a disproportionality of our students who are cognitively impaired, we believe that all of those students are appropriately placed, and we don't really expect that percentage is going to change next year. We expect to be in the same situation where the state is going to require us to spend the money on this program. The good news was that we were planning on this program anyway. This just pushed us into adoption a year before we probably would have otherwise. But that program is well on its way to being launched. You also are aware that there's a new law that was passed effective August 1st that requires us to change our policies and procedures for expulsions and suspensions. A part of that is the requirement that we consider those factors that I had shared with you before, and that we consider restorative practices for all of our students and alternates to suspension. There has also been for quite a while a Michigan model of student code of conduct that is supposed to be updated. The state hasn't provided that most updated copy for us yet, but we have adopted the Michigan model 2014 version in the secondary buildings, but it doesn't reflect all the pieces and parts of the new law. So we've submitted some changes to our administrative guidelines to reflect the changes in the new law. We've just really gotten started in this. We have some administrators in the district that have been trained in restorative practices, and much of that work is starting at the high school, and this is also an ongoing agenda at our administrative staff meetings. And the implementation district-wide then will, in this case, is going to move in the reverse order. We're starting at the high school. The middle school is already doing some of this, but we will be requiring full implementation for the middle school the following year. And a lot of the restorative practices are community building. So the research is pretty clear, and it's our belief that if we build better relationships and do some community building, we will in all likelihood reduce the incidence of students being sent to the office on disciplinary referrals. We're doing a lot of work in this respect and just getting started on that. We can take the next one.
So, least restrictive environment is fairly new added to this. What our requirement is to by child find, identify students as soon as we suspect they have a disability, but also to educate them as much as possible in general education. And what we've been finding across the state is that as the curriculum's gotten harder, that students have ended up in special education classes more and more hours. So it's the Office of Special Education state initiative this year to look at that by district and try to make sure that kids are being educated in the least restrictive environment. So we're starting this year. We did get a data warning letter that they're going to come and investigate. And so we started with planning and looking at how much kids are in special education per building. And we're going to be looking at each of the students' programming across buildings and seeing if there's a way that we can put supports in so that kids can be in general education for more hours.
And then the last one is the notion of career and college readiness, also something that we are required to consider at all levels. The high school has been exploring the option of early middle colleges for some time, and they continue to work on that. It's their hope to bring a proposal to the board sometime this year. The high school staff engaged in a book study this summer where they really dove into the college and career readiness standards and are beginning to match all of those skills and making sure that students at every grade level are exposed to or given an opportunity to experience learning in the college and career readiness skills. We talked today at our administrative staff meeting. By next year, we will continue that focus to grades 6 through 8, and then the following year to K-12. This is going to become the main focus of the ILDT, which is going to be leading the strategic direction this year in looking at new and innovative programming. We believe that if we start from a position of college and career readiness skills, that will be a more effective impetus in our buildings to make sure that we're providing the most innovative and important and supportive class offerings and programs to our students K-12. So that's a really quick overview of initiatives, both required and by choice. But again, we've put this into a 5-year document because we want to keep it in front of everybody. We want to make sure that all of our decisions financially, from a technology standpoint, are all supporting the next step in all of these initiatives. And again, this will be a standing item on our administrative team agendas, and the buildings will have many of these items on their monthly staff meetings.
So just one thing that will be added to the 5-year plan, as we spoke with Mike Tashi yesterday, there needs to be a technology focus. So for example, the Chromebooks that we purchased several years ago are on their end of their life cycle, so to speak, and so we need to make a plan for how we're going to be replacing those Chromebooks that are needed for the standardized testing. So we'll be adding technology, and this is a living, breathing document. We want to make adjustments as we need to and keep it in front of everyone at the same time.
Is Mr. Tashi able to plug into this plan what he already has and what he needs, or?
That is his plan.
Okay.
It's going to be on the cabinet agenda for October, and then we'll get it on the plan when we know more.
And he has some of this in a separate document, so we're now starting to merge. We've put this document, we're entering a new arena for the Google platform, which is a team drive, where nobody owns the document, and so this is our place of learning for all the administrators in this 5-year plan. We're going to put it on a team drive and see how that works.
Oh, thanks. Are there any questions from the board? I have a couple about, can you explain what Pivot is again?
Sure. Pivot is just an online platform that allows us to upload, if you recall a while ago when Jill showed you the 5D Plus and how an administrator logs in and does the observation, and we do all of our self-assessments and our growth plans. It's just an online platform where we house all the information.
Okay, thank you. And the Panorama program, is that with the PBIS for that program?
Panorama is the one that we looked at the community support team.
Right.
Where there were for the subscription, there are 3 perception surveys that include some of the social emotional learning competencies, and then there's the separate survey for 3rd through 12th graders, and we're also going to have the teachers evaluate the K1 and 2 students, and then it was attached to that playbook for teacher access.
Okay, because if I remember right, it's helping recognize behavior problems like anti-bullying issues.
No, those aren't really the social emotional learning competencies. If you would like, I would be happy to show you some of the Panorama information at a future date. But that might be something like self-efficacy, grit, perseverance.
Is it where they take note any changes in those behaviors?
So I'm going to do K-5 right now. I'll do 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Once the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders take this assessment where they're answering questions about the competencies, then that information will be available to the classroom teacher and to the K-5's gen ed social worker. So I might get a spreadsheet on this class and note that of these 25 3rd graders, that there are 17 of them who rated themselves very low in grit, or in perseverance. And so as a teacher, I want to make sure that I'm incorporating some strategies into my lessons that would help students increase their perseverance or their self-efficacy, speaking up, you know, on myself. How easily does a student give up? So that's what we call Tier 1, and that's at the level of the classroom. So then the teachers have access to the playbook, which matches and provides a lot of strategies for them. Once that survey information is available, then the social workers will identify their caseload, and those are the students that, that show skills that cause us to be concerned about their success as a learner, and that will become their caseload, and that would be for Tier 2 interventions, which might be a check-in, check-out, it might be groups, it might be additional lessons, it could be a lot of things. And we're rolling this out very slowly. Then eventually, from just the behaviors that students exhibit, I'm sure that we're going to have some students that need Tier 3 interventions, which are one-on-one, a behavior support plan, those sorts of things. That's just a really general overview of how Panorama is going to support our work.
Okay. I watched that presentation. I just got bullying, or I think
So
the
the way it goes together with the PBIS is that we also have positive behavior support interventionists at all of the elementary buildings. They have weekly lessons for kindergartners, and they have monthly lessons for grades 1 through 5, which support things
Like responsibility.
yeah,
Perseverance,
yeah.
all of it. Being friends.
Yeah, and so
Like that group,
the PBIS interventionists and the social workers will work together. We have them scheduled into the building so that every day, if we have a student who's on a check-in, check-out, that's I check in at the beginning of the day, I check out at the end of the day. That's sort of the monitoring of how the student did. We have a lot of opportunities for them to reset during the school day. That would be one of those two people would be available every morning and every afternoon for the student who needs a check-in, check-out.
That's good. Just one more question. The de-escalation training by the administrators, is that mandatory, or is that just something they have to have by a certain time?
Well, let me talk a little bit about that. So that is sort of related to the new seclusion and restraint law that's been passed, which requires any employee who has any exposure to students, they had to have awareness training. So that occurred with our Safe Schools tutorials. Everyone in the district is completing that. The other part of that is that any employee who would be likely to work with a student who could possibly be in a position to need a restraint, they have to have very specific training. A part of that training is de-escalation techniques. So as a district, we're not required to have that training for all the administrators. There's requirements at Beacon for that, but we are choosing to train all of the administrators at a future date in the de-escalation part of that. And then we also make the CPI training available to administrators. We have quite a few who are trained, and to staff members who want to. Eventually, we would like to offer that de-escalation training to all our professional staff.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Koopser?
Thank you. Ms. Grecian, as it relates to the 5-year plan, I would expect there's associated costs with each of these items. And there's projections, I'm imagining, related to them. Is it possible, as we continue to make this a living document, that projections might be included in those?
Our hope was to, to sort of do the whole millage spending and all of that, along the way. Much of this is not additional cost. It's simply a reallocation of staff that we currently have. But we can certainly start to capture some of the costs. For example, the curriculum changes, those would come to the board as there is a curriculum change to be approved, and those would be coming from the curriculum budget. I'm trying to think of some of the other, things. There is surprisingly little cost for these above and beyond what's already in the general fund, but I will certainly try to capture some of the financial information for the board to go along with this.
I was expecting that would be in the the general fund itself, just so we can tie more readily to the curriculum budget and how much is being spent on curriculum in this particular instance as part of the 5-year plan as we look at it as a projecting forward. It's just better understanding how it relates to the overall budget is what I'm asking for.
A good example would be to go back to student growth. There's not a cost associated with that. That's just something that we have to do, and we just have to provide that training and professional development to our staff as best we can.
Understood.
Okay.
Mr. Koopser? Actually, the Panorama software, that was already in this year's budget, and it's part of our IDEA grant budget. That was part of the required 15% that we had to set aside for the budget, and that was about $17,600.
Any other questions?
Teresa, didn't we move that to 31A?
I'm sorry?
We moved that to 31A. Or was that risk?
The Panorama.
You're right, they did. We're still working on getting all the grants in, so. there's-
Okay.
It's covered under one of our.
Or the grants.
I understand.
Yeah, and what we'll try to do, we'll try to put some kind of a note in these columns so that you would know where the funding is coming from. That's-
So which budget and the amount, that,
your-
it just
your
helps
point
us
is-
as we.
Absolutely, your
Thank
point
you.
is well taken.
Thank you.
The issue is that both of our grants are heavily dependent on salaries, and so when one person switches, sometimes the salary changes, so the additional supply costs switch over a little bit. Does that make sense? Like, if I have a high-paid person go into a job, that ups my salary for my grant, and then we just do a little switching.
Makes a little sense.
We will include some financial information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Get that off. It's a green one.
So is that a combined report for curriculum and superintendent? Okay.
That's all of us.
Okay.
Finance too.
Okay, so moving on to board president update. I just wanted to mention that the Beacon is having their Grand Rapids Art Competition, and I don't know if any other board members are going, but that's, is that September 29th?
It's a board night.
It's a board, wait, what date is that? We switched it?
No, they changed it. I don't have that information
Okay.
with me.
Oh, it was originally a board.
No, she changed it. It's the 29th.
29th, it's the 29th.
What's the 20th?
I actually have a new email from Jill Ross, who's the art teacher, somewhere in my inbox that came in yesterday that I think she's asking me to send it back out and re-invite some other people and send the information again, so that will be coming.
Okay. And the only other thing I have for president update is to have board members take a look at the board self-assessment. That's going to be due within the next couple of months. And I'm going to send a template again in one of the work sessions for the upcoming meetings. And that's all I have for board president update. Any citizen comments? Okay. Moving on to consent. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which consists of HR update and disbursements for August of 2017.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Craig and a support by Mr. Koopser. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to action items. We are going to move into a closed session for the first item.
Yeah, and we do need a majority vote on this, not a roll call.
Okay.
I make a motion that we go into closed session.
Second.
Point of order, we have to state our
State the
reason for
reason.
going into it.
For reinstatement recommendation for student 2015-16-3.
Second.
Do we need a roll call to go into?
Not a roll
Okay.
call, just a vote.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving into close. Okay, I make a motion that we, I make a motion that we have a motion to come out of close.
Second?
No.
Point of order, not necessary?
No, I can't.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion that we come out of
Motion.
closed session. There you go.
Okay, Mr. Kreutzer,
Support.
Mr. Craig. Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Kreutzer and a second by Mr. Craig. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving into,
Still on action item
oh,
one.
let's do action item number 1.
I make a motion, I move to approve the reinstatement application and recommendation of the reinstatement committee for full reinstatement for student 2015-16-3.
Support.
Okay, we can't have a discussion on that, can we? It's confidential.
Can't say a name, you can't say
Right.
anything.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing,
You're allowed to make very general comments if you
Right.
choose, but that's all.
okay. Seeing none.
I don't think it needs to be.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Point of order, you need a roll call vote for this one.
That's okay. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Koopser?
Yes.
Mr. Freitas?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio?
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving on to action item number 2. Is there any discussion, Mrs. McLaughlin?
I didn't know if you were going to read it.
Oh, no, sorry.
Can't read it.
Not the motion, just the item.
Right.
Not the whole thing. I didn't know if you were going to say what the
Right,
action
no,
item
you can
2
go ahead and
was.
speak. Just, if there's any
Okay.
discussion,
It's
Teresa.
it's to request the closing of our transitions checking account. It was an account that was set up to facilitate that program's community-based instruction activities. And based on enrollment data over the summer, Wayne County RESA made the determination that Southgate would not be operating the transitions program, and the students would be going to similar programs in other districts. So our budget for Act 18, when we do the amendment, will not include the transitions program, and so at this point, there's no need for this checking account anymore. So I'm requesting that you approve the closure of the account.
Okay, any discussion? Okay.
Madam President, I make a
Mr.
motion
Green?
to approve the closing of the transitions checking account at Huntington Bank, account number ending in 7960.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Green and a support by Mr. Estheimer. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to employee representatives. Are there any employee representatives? Okay, thank you. Moving on to information and announcements. Any announcements from the board?
Yes, I have
Mr.
a few.
Estheimer?
First of all, I apologize for being a few minutes late. I was coaching a soccer game, but I will tell you that I was, hey, Luke, I was following along on YouTube on the way over here listening to it, so that's working. I didn't miss very much discussion. You did have an employee representative here that I didn't catch her name. I tuned in just a few minutes later, so welcome aboard to the new hire. I wanted to report to you that as liaison to the City Council this past week, I made a presentation that updated them on summer construction as it pertains to the Voter Pass Bond Initiative. Thanks to Ms. Creasham for her help in drafting the guiding document, and I have a copy for you of the presentation, Madam President.
Thank you.
I'll meet with Council quarterly and update them on district happenings or as needed. Our liaison from Council, Mr. Roush, humbly yielded his time to me during the work session and allowed me to speak on his behalf. I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Mr. Dan Connors, our food service director, and his team. We received an email that during a recent review by the state of Michigan, the school's nutrition program, no findings were identified, and they commended he and his staff for a job well done. for its administration of the school's nutrition program. So good job to that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about shelters. Welcome back to the kids there at shelters. They do have a PTO meeting on Thursday at 6:30. Encourage everyone to attend. And then their first event is Friday, September 22nd. It's just for PTO students, K through 5. It's a Nerf night, and it has a cost of $10 per player, and being held at Don River Gymnastics in Southgate.
I have a correction on
Yeah.
that event is not been approved. It's canceled.
Thank you for that. At Ford Line, tomorrow's their ice cream social with a $1 donation to benefit the PTO. That runs from 6:30 to 7:30. Is that still going on?
I don't know anything about that one. I just know that the one on Downriver Gymnastics is not going to happen.
And their Thursday at 6:00 p.m. is their first PTO meeting at Ford Line. And lastly, the games are probably over, but good luck to the girls freshman volleyball, the boys varsity tennis, the girls junior varsity volleyball, and all that whom had games today that I didn't hear the results of. And lastly, I don't want to steal Mr. Green's thunder, but congratulations to the varsity football team for toppling Trenton. I'm sure Andy will get into more detail on that. And that's all I have for you.
I want to add a comment, especially about the win. Well, several things. There were some city council members in attendance of the football game on Friday, and they were very grateful for Mr. Estheimer's report, and it was an awesome win by the football team. But tonight, I cannot tell you how exciting it was to attend a tennis match on our tennis courts, and the coaches believe it's the first home match that we've been able to hold since 2001. So then I walked over and caught a little bit of girls volleyball in the gym with all of our new bleachers and our new lights, which were really nice. And then I walked over and the band was practicing on the newly lined student parking lot field. And then I walked over to the track where the cross-country team was running on our new track. It was just a phenomenal experience to see all of that going on in all the new facilities. So it was nice.
Okay, any other announcements? Mr. Green?
A couple. Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'd like to welcome back all the Asher students who started school this week. Grogan Elementary had their ice cream social last Wednesday. It was very successful. They have a PTO meeting on the 12th, their first PTO meeting, if any Grogan parents are viewing that would like to attend. Also, they have their first Friday movie night on the 15th. I too would like to congratulate and wish luck to all the boys and girls sports teams. I wasn't going to say too much about football, but that was a nice win for us. It's always nice when it's still relatively close and Mr. Pinkowski is over my shoulder going, we need a 12-minute drive, we need a 12-minute drive. But it was good for the kids. The kids played very well, and so I wish all the programs, not just the sports teams, the junior ROTC, the band, as we start the school year, continued success. Mr. Estheimer has thrown me a note that we should thank the superintendent and the construction team for showing us all the updated construction last week when we did a walkthrough. Thank you, Mr. Estheimer. And next Friday, I don't think we'll have we won't have a meeting before then. Not this coming Friday. Yeah, I guess we will. Homecoming is in a couple of weeks, but forget it. I'm done.
29. Any other announcements?
Madam President?
Mrs. Reed?
I just wanted to announce that September 25th is the annual Powder Puff game, 7 p.m. at the high school. This has been an annual fundraiser for the senior prom for several years. It's listed at 7 on the advert, yes. So if there needs to be a change, you should know because I'm looking at it right online.
Ms. Mark, it's supposed to be 6 o'clock start.
Okay, so I will post that, but if you're watching, the announcement does say 7. For all students who participated, sent me emails and information on what they did to acknowledge Suicide Prevention Week. I appreciate all that you're doing from grades 6 through 12, including parents and families who've been involved, done small fundraisers, and done their part to pay attention. I know there's a lot of big bands that have been promoting on social media that probably got more teenagers involved in the last 2 years, but it was really good to see a lot of our Southgate students take the initiative to do this on their own. This week at the high school during lunch, by Thursday, cap and gown deposits are due for graduating seniors. It's $50. Jostens will be in the lunch area, and they set up a table. They have the information. Your child can fill it out. It should have went home with them. If you don't have that, I will post that online. And then a reminder for those parents who signed up to go to the this Friday, September 15th from 1 to 3 p.m. In Wellston, Michigan, understanding the content of the IEP. I know that there was a group that is going, and Nicole Miller was who was taking the registration, I believe, but there was a parent who was putting together carpooling for the few that were going. So if you need more information on that, you can contact me as well. That's it.
Thank you. I just wanted to say also with the walkthrough, for the parents who haven't seen all the new updates, you'd be very proud because everything looks so great. And as Mr. Estheimer and Mr. Green and I myself walked through everything, seeing the new bleachers and the tennis courts and the new football stands and the track, everything's great. And even the parking lot with the numbers for the band. So you'd be very proud. So hopefully get a chance to get out there and take a look at it, those through events and everything. The web leaders, great job for the summer training and for your training for your new crew for 6th graders and for registration day. Also, just welcome back to everyone, students, parents, and staff. Have a great school year. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we're moving on to work session. The first one is millage spending. We have the athletic budget. Mr. Pinkowski.
So as Dave is getting ready to talk to you, just a review for the viewing audience. I had brought some proposals to the board a few weeks ago from the priority lists that were developed by the parent meetings a while ago as to what the priorities might be in the district for spending some of the millage money. There was a high on the list was a lot of athletic needs. So I had brought some proposals, including one to increase the athletic department budget. The board had a lot of questions. One thing came up about transportation, and you had questions about a lot of non-athletic programs. I have about 75% of that work done, and I'm going to bring that information back to you as soon as I can get that finished, so that's coming separately. But you did have some questions about the current level of funding of transportation for athletic events, and you had a lot of questions about equipment and what equipment we need and what we've spent money on. I was not the expert in the room, and so you had asked if Mr. Pinkowski could come back and answer a lot of your questions. So that's what has brought Mr. Pinkowski to you this evening.
Hi. How are you?
I'm here to answer any questions you have about athletic spending or budgets or what things cost. I have lots of information that I've gathered from previous years, so let me know what you'd like to know, and I'd be glad to help you through that.
One of the things I have off the top of my head with the pay-to-play, since we eliminated that, does that boost your budget a little bit, or how does that work with?
Let me address the pay-to-play. The pay-to-play fees always went into the general fund.
Okay,
that was always deposited directly into the general fund. From the general fund, then we develop the budget that you approve every year. So the fluctuations in pay-to-play would have no direct influence on the athletic budget.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Mr. Rakowski, is there a plan? Do you have a priority list? I mean, do we know female basketball uniforms, male baseball uniforms? Is there a priority of where you know this money is going to go? I mean, do you have a order list?
When we had a regular budget, there was a regular rotation of purchasing equipment and uniforms. All of that has fallen on the boosters and the parents to supply yearly for the last 5 years, maybe 6 now. And so some teams do a better job of fundraising than others. So if they have more desire to get other uniforms or more equipment, then they had more fundraisers, and they were able to keep some of their equipment up. Some of them have not had, full support, so some of them are getting pretty raggedy, and they could use some help. So if we were able to get a regular budget that was consistent, we would start that rotation back in, where we would make sure that the teams looked appropriate. They were up to date with and follow all the rules. There have been some rule changes that have happened through the MHSAA, through the National Federation of High Schools. So there's some uniform changes that had to occur. So all those things can now take place if we were able to have a regular budget, and we would rotate them equally throughout the entire program.
Can you talk a little bit, because two of the points that I was making were, first, with transportation, we're providing very limited transportation, maybe what we're currently providing versus what we used to, because that's been a real challenge for parents, the lack of transportation. And the other was just the general equipment. The one example that I had given the board was that we no longer have an ice machine, a functioning ice machine in the field house, and we have an awful lot of outdoor athletic events that it makes access to ice when we need it, a time-consuming venture. But this is more basic than that. I don't think that the board necessarily has a sense of, even in terms of like baseballs and basketballs and that sort of thing, what have we supplied for teams, and what are booster groups, AKA parents, currently providing to the athletic teams?
Well, they're right now basically everything, including tournament entry fees. There are three major categories that I had some discretionary funds to purchase. One was equipment replacement, so that's anything that's a big ticket item that needs to be replaced, such as helmets, footballs, or actual equipment we keep from year to year, backboards, hoops, nets, goals, ice machines, anything like that, any kind of major equipment that we have from year to year that we reuse. That's an equipment replacement. And then within equipment replacement, we also included uniforms. That was part of our rotation. And then we had a supplies budget. And supplies are things that are perishables. So all the balls that are used for a year, they may become practice balls, but they do wear out, or things that cannot be reused. Those are supplies. And then included in some of this, another line item is athletic supplies. And we haven't purchased, training supplies for medical reasons. We have another line item for that, and we haven't replenished those in the last 3 years. We've just gone on what we had left, and we are trying to get some of that this year. Did you want to speak? Do you want me to speak about the transportation portion as well?
Yeah, give a little sense.
I do have a
where we
spreadsheet
are.
here that of the things that how much we've been. You kind of know what kind of transportation we had in the last couple of years, and what it was limited to. We put together what it would cost to actually have full busing for athletics. However, some of the practices we've put in place, there are some teams, even if we allowed them to have full transportation, they appreciated having some flexibility to not necessarily use it, especially if it was more beneficial to the students and parents not to have a return trip. So I have that spreadsheet. I think I shared that with you, and it was shared with you as well.
Past.
So it has all the projections on there of what it would cost to have full, and that included the middle school as well, for all levels and all sports. Okay. What else?
What's your current budget right now, and what would you need to see to help you with most of the things that you need?
Annually, I've looked at other some nearby budgets of some other districts, and they fluctuate depending on what's included in the discretionary money or not. Some things like equipment maintenance, like when we refurbish the helmets and the shoulder pads and things like that. That's a separate line item, but if that's included in some people's budgets. So, I've seen them fluctuate anywhere from $25,000 all the way up to $100,000 per year, depending on the school and how much they include in those areas. Where we used to be was about $75,000 in discretionary money to be able to take care of supplies, equipment, and general maintenance of all of the gear.
And then it got tailored back to
Zero.
That's
We're the money that I was proposing was for discretionary money. I was not proposing any change in the current budget, which really supports insurance,
coaches,
pay,
referees,
officials, that sort of thing.
Limited transportation, limited game help.
Yeah, and a
So that's
very
what I
small
wanted
amount of
the viewing
discretionary.
audience to see.
Just enough to
Yeah.
get by. And then, we haven't had tournament entry fees in quite a while. We haven't had awards. So even the varsity letters, those go to the teams for them to pay for through Booster Club money. So all those things, and I would really love to be able to take the awards back and purchase those through the athletic department through our discretionary money. Tournament entry fees, there are some teams like competitive cheerleading and wrestling, they don't have a schedule without tournaments. So really, they base almost their entire schedule on that. Not as much, but it still goes for cross country, track. There are lots of teams, golf, tennis. There are tons of them that have all these tournaments they go to, but it costs them anywhere from $100 to $250 per tournament to enter. And so they have to fundraise just to get the busing for those weekends and to enter those tournaments. So those are some of the things that they've incurred. There's a few of them most of their fundraising just goes right to tournament entry fees and balls. So yeah, it would be nice to be able to take those burdens off so they can, the money that they still fundraise, they could do other things with. 100% of their money goes right back to our kids. It would just be nice that they could do some other things with that money rather than the basics.
Under the bond program, there was a small amount of very specific athletic equipment monies that we were able to spend. We bought some new soccer goals. There's some things like that. So we've been able to make a couple of purchases. Mr. Pinkowski has successfully found some supportive donors for some bigger ticket item pieces of athletic equipment, but as he said, it's been a long time since we've purchased any big items. And again, one of, I guess my concerns are the ice machine. I think for the safety of many programs that occur outside, I think we need that extra ice machine. I would like to provide an increased level of transportation. I agree. I don't think we need full transportation because many parents now prefer to drive their kids home, and we don't need that bus waiting to bring everybody back home. But the early contests with the younger kids, when parents are still at work, it's really been a struggle to get our teams in that. And then finally, even the uniforms, it would be nice to replace those, but I'm just, the money that I propose, the discretionary money that I see is just, I really feel very bad for the parents that have to fundraise to provide a basketball for their team that plays basketball. And as Mr. Pinkowski said, the letter awards, it's unfortunate that we're in that situation, but we have been. But I think we have an opportunity to restore some discretionary money, and it's going to take Mr. Pinkowski a year or two just to catch up with the years that we've really not been able to do anything in that realm.
If I was able to get a budget, we would still stay with the same philosophy of zero base, where they're coming with needs, not wants, and then we work our way eventually to some of the wants if we can get there. But making certain that the things that we need that have to be there in place, the fundamentals are in place first, and then we go from there.
Mr. Green?
I know this isn't going to happen in the first year or the second year, but if through the duration of the bond, if there is excess money, will it get rolled over into the budget the next year?
It can't. From the bond? No.
Oh, not the bond. Oh, that's right, for the millage. So if we get you the budget for $100,000, you better be spending $100,000 basically, right? Use it or lose it?
Well, I've never done that. Whatever budget I've had throughout my entire career, I've always been under.
Right, I'm just asking.
Yeah, so, I mean, just because I have it doesn't mean I'm going to spend it.
Okay.
Just so you know that. If you give me money, the needs will be met, but I won't spend just because the money's there. I never have, I never will.
I would absolutely confirm that.
So the excess money would go where then?
Back to the general fund.
Back to the general fund?
Well, it goes back to the general fund, but we had agreed to earmark all of the millage money so that the millage money is in the general fund, but we're keeping track of that separately.
Okay. Thank you.
So for the duration of the millage, is it every year, or is it through the whole 5 years that he's going to be allocated?
My proposal, which included increases to the budget for curriculum and maintenance and athletics, would have been for the duration of the current millage approval.
Okay.
Madam President? I just had a couple questions. Do we know how much the ice machine costs? Do we have a quote?
They can run, depending on the size, they can run anywhere from, if we just used our old tank and the new unit, they can be as little as 2,000, but, you know, the old one was very small and was leaking in spots. So
An
I think it'd be
adequate ice
closer
machine
5.
would be about 4,500
Yeah.
to 5,000.
So it's
What
my
we need.
understanding that in the past, pay-to-play money would go into the general fund and could be used to supplement and support athletics if needed. This year, we took that portion of the burden off of parents, and then out of the bond, what would have been the equivalent for that went into the general fund. Is there a way that we could just say, okay, we know that that amount is in there to supplement or support? The ice machine sounds like it's important, it has to do with safety. Can we say that is a priority to come from the money that was allocated that would have been the pay-to-play money?
Well, you lost me on the pay-to-play money, but if you're asking if we can direct Mr. Pinkowski to make sure that an ice machine is one of his purchases, I absolutely can do
So
that.
then let me be clear if I lost you. The pay-to-play money that we usually collect had always went into general fund, knowing that it could support athletics if needed, or it can go elsewhere.
Goes wherever.
We removed the pay-to-play fee. So this board went ahead and approved the fact that we took that same amount that we would have expected from pay-to-play from the millage. It went into the general fund, same rules apply. So can we not just go ahead and purchase this ice machine right away?
Well, we currently don't feel that we have the general funds to make those purchases. But yeah, we can.
It was, how much was it that, it was $37,000?
It was about 60,000. It can
60,000.
fluctuate between 60 and 70,000, depending on the sports and the participation. So the participant fees are recorded as revenue. And Mr. Pinkowski's budget is part of the expenditure.
Right.
So to put it in perspective, the athletic fund budget is, the total is between 500,000 and 600,000. We collect 60,000, so those fees are not even close to covering
Right, but that's,
budget. So
what I'm saying is from that portion that we know is in the general fund, which is, and can be used to pad anything that's an emergency athletic, couldn't we just purchase that ice machine from that 60,000?
As a district, we could. It is not our practice to make purchases for programs on an individual basis. I think it's probably a better practice for us to award I could make a book purchase out of the general funds if that's something that I thought was appropriate. I believe it's more appropriate for the curriculum director to be responsible for prioritizing those purchases and to have a budget. So I guess, can I? Yes. Would I prefer to have a defined amount to increase the athletic budget and ask the athletic budget or the athletic director to be making those priority decisions? That would be my preference.
Does everybody understand what I'm saying, though,
Yeah.
on this side?
I think I do, but I think what administration is saying is that they would just turn it over as discretionary funds, whatever amount we decide on, and then it would be up to the athletic director to determine how you're going to spend those discretionary funds. And I'll assume one of them would be on an ice machine
first.
But that I think all they're looking for is an amount for discretionary funds rather than define individual items.
I think I know what you're saying, Mr. Reed, but I think part of that revenue no longer exists. That revenue stream is now stopped. So it's not like we could take the money that was coming from the parents and that went to the general fund and then replace it, and that's gone now.
We did. We took it
Right.
from the millage, and it's back
Right.
in the general fund, just
Okay.
as it would.
So you just want to just reuse that
Yes,
money?
and part of it.
As
If
a
it's
request from the board
$60,000.
as a
Right.
priority, something
So
that's-
that, because.
Makes sense.
Because I ask if it has been suggested that the $100,000 go for the term, which is the each year for it to be recurrent, then this would be an item that we know would have come from pay-to-play and not affect that $100,000 per year. My second question is, and I think I talked to Darlene quickly about this. There's been several things going online, and I did have a few parents contact me that there was fundraising happening door to door, and it wasn't selling anything. It was actually just collecting donations door to door, and then several were organized online. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about the safety protocol. We do have guidelines on that. We talk about, when you go door to door, you don't know whose door you're knocking on.
Do you know what level, whether middle school, high school,
It was
or
a
what
marching
program?
band, I think it was marching band.
Marching band, okay.
So we just maybe want to check with that to make sure that.
Sure, I'll bring that back to Dr. Baker-Herring.
Yeah, so that if people know that, you're getting an increase, let's work with that, and that if those groups get together, who would they check in with, so that maybe Dr. Baker-Herring or yourself can say, no, it's a policy that we don't do door to door, and here's why, and if we are going to do it one time, things like that. It's just a parental concern.
Got it.
I thought we had the discussion with crowdfunding or something like that came in that, I don't know if it
We
was
do have a
policy.
policy for crowdfunding, and we do also have policies and procedures for direct sales and door-to-door sales, and we will investigate this one.
Yep.
Can you send me some information on that? Because I tried to look it up and I couldn't find the policy on that or the guidelines.
If you just word search fundraiser, you'll get most of it.
You know when the date of that door-to-door sales happened?
That was just about a week ago.
Saturday.
It was Saturday.
It might have been right during the transition of our director.
We'll look into that.
And the thing and I just want to bring up, the parents are so involved, and we don't want to discourage parents, and it's great if parents want to get together and say, hey, can we? But I would prefer the can we than the let's. So we should maybe, get together with our parents of these programs and say, here's what our policies are, and because it's a safety thing, it's not like we're trying to micromanage. And obviously everybody knew that it was happening, so I know who lives in my neighborhood, but these kids might not know who's on the next block over, so maybe just a informal message out to all parents to say, when you know that you're doing this, here's who you ask first.
Right, and that's something that we have to stress every year, because we get new parents every year, and they don't know the rules, and so they just, they go on what they think is right or what they've done.
But we don't want to discourage.
private groups instead of what schools are expecting and what our policies are. So the communication to the new parents, definitely.
Well, this particular parent is a veteran of the band program, so
really?
I happen to notice it too on all the parent pages. So I'm not sure.
On a regular
if there's
basis, we
approval.
try to remain diligent and remind people of the policies and procedures. Thus, the cancellation of an event that Mr. Estheimer had shared with us. So
they are
anytime,
posted,
please,
too.
I say this repeatedly, anytime that a parent or a board member sees something that you're not sure is as it should be, please email me, because we will check it out immediately. And this may be fine, but it may not be, but we'll find out.
And then one other thing, and I don't know if this has to do with athletics because I'm curious as where it went. There have been a lot of parents who've contacted, I know at least several of the board members, regarding the cost for the parking fee. And I don't know where that money goes, but it's always been $5. It's $20 this year. Do we
Yes.
know where that change came
Yeah,
from?
that came on, there was an incremental increase to the parking. We've compared ourselves to other schools, and $20 is still below every other school that charges fees in our area. That money goes for it goes into the security budget, and then they use that to purchase security equipment for the school. So it's gone into video cameras, it's gone into walkie-talkies, it's gone into additional items that our security personnel use for nighttime events. So all those things that would involve security, the parking fees
I'm
help fund.
absolutely all for that. Ms. Cretion, is there something that maybe could go on your superintendent Facebook page regarding that? Because now we have a lot of parents who are saying, well, my kids will just park on Leroy. And we don't want to do that either. So I don't know how much of an explanation went out to parents when they signed up.
We've had some more, there's some more going out with the parking flow. Once the last lines go in place, we're going to get some more pictures and photos and drone photos, and then we're going to share that with the community and the parents. Part of that, of the increase we talked about, is because we've been able to enhance our security surveillance, especially outside, that we let them know that we do have 24-hour surveillance outside of all of our parking lots. So if they park in our lots, they will have video security the entire time they're there. We don't video the streets. So if you're on the streets, I mean, you're welcome to use it. It's public property, but we do have an added level of security by parking on property. And we also have a security staff that regularly patrols it in the mornings after school. And so
And I
it's
think
safer.
it would be welcomed as long as there was that a little bit of tutelage with it.
Exactly. And that'll go out with the parking scenario. That'll
And then
go out
one
with it.
other thing that might sound silly, but new parents to the school, with all of our new updates at the high school parking lot, I've had several people reach out to me and ask why we have a security tower in the parking lot of the high school. And I have explained, and I just wanted to have it be part of the board meeting, that this is part of the band program, and the band directors, from what I understand, can be up and see everyone, and that's why our numbers are on the sidewalk. So if you want to just confirm that.
Yeah, that's how that's how they practice. Is they have the directors are up on the perch, and they are able to see their formations, and they can make certain that they're where they're supposed to be, and then they can reset them. We had the same type of scaffolding over by the baseball field when they were on the other field. It just not
It's
as many
just
people
more
saw
visible
it.
now,
Now it's
so-
blue and it's right there.
Right,
That's like
in
the
the
most
middle.
asked question I get like daily from any resident,
Right.
especially walking around or in the evening. But that also will be taken down every fall and then put back up in the summer. It's only for the band season, so that'll be stored each and every year, so that people don't get a wise idea of climbing it or making it a
Right.
something dangerous. So it's only up for the marching season. Then it'll be stored the rest of the year.
Okay, thank
And
you.
They have harnesses and security, and it's very safe. But only adults use it, and only the staff members.
And it is not for security posting?
No, it's not for security.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Craig?
We've talked a couple times about fundraising. Is that something that the groups have to come and ask permission for?
Yes.
Or can they just, so?
They have lots of great ideas. There are some automatic ones that it's relatively remote control because they've done them every year, but they still have a process of going through the office to get approved of all fundraisers. We have a calendar as well. And the reason we have the calendar is we don't want groups to step on each other's toes. Like if someone's doing a bottle drive on this Saturday, we don't want another group trying to do a bottle drive on that Saturday. It's just too taxing. Or if someone's doing a restaurant fundraiser, we don't want another person to go right the same day or a day before or after on the same restaurant. So we spread it out that by using the calendar, and then they get approved through the office, and it was student council has helped with that over the years, but the main office is where they go through the principal's office, and they get approval for those, and they get put on the calendar, and they're good to go. The problem is when we have new folks, they tend to skip that problem, and they start having fundraisers, and they haven't taken just a couple seconds to send an email to Ms. Majeski to get on the calendar to seek the approval.
Do they have to give you some kind of a budget about what it's going to be spent on, or is it just as much as we can collect, as fast as we can collect?
Yeah, when they collect the money, then they deposit it into the student activities account, and then they put that how much they collected or what they collected it from, and they put that as a note in the deposit, so we know that this is a bottle drive and they collected $5,000 or $2,000, and then that's always on the record.
Not specific to the fundraiser and what it was and how much they collected, but what are they going to spend it on? Because that's the complaint that I hear a lot from parents is, why are we doing this again? Why do they need this much money?
And that's something that the person who was
I hear we bought New Jerseys last year. Why do we need a spirit pack? Why do I? Because it's kind of that arm twisting of you're going to be on the team. Welcome. Now here's how much money you have to fundraise, and that's the complaint that
So
I know for athletics.
I'm going to use that for my plea that the sooner we get back to the district supporting athletic needs such as uniforms completely, that becomes, we have a lot more control over that.
Okay.
The school would not be purchasing 4 or 5 different sets of uniforms, but when it's a parent-led booster group, it's difficult for us to control all of that.
Yeah, that's my point is who gets to say it's great if you need something you can fundraise for it, but you don't need this.
Well,
and I don't know if we're getting to that point to say you don't need this because it's theirs. They get to kind of do
right. When they raise the money, they spend it on what collectively they like. Basically, we have the coach or the sponsor of that group. They set what the priority is to make that group successful. So I know I'll use football as an example. Mitch Dobek's our head coach. He sets a priority of these are the things that we need to be successful this year for the program. And then he presents that to the parents when they have a parent meeting. The boosters come, they all talk about, and then they have their input, and then they can talk about it, and then they say, well, we really like this a lot, but we really want to do more of this, and then they have that discussion. But the buck stops with the person who's running the program, and then to make sure that they are spending that money wisely. A lot of times there were fundraisers in the past where parents were spending the money on things like memory books or videos or banquets, and some of the priority things never got taken care of, and so it left that group without being able to do some of the fundamentals. So it's more of a refocusing, is that we know what the priorities are, they get that, and if they want to do above and beyond to do some of those extra things, which are very nice to have, they do those extra fundraisers for those things as well.
No, and that's I guess what I was hoping for, is that we had some kind of district oversight into say.
It is. It's always the person who's in charge of that program.
Okay.
So it's the band director, the coach, the sponsor of the club, whatever it is, that person is the ultimate. No purchases can be made without that person giving the okay.
Right, and I guess that's my concern, is some of those, and I don't want to generalize them, but some of them have had a past of saying, I want the spirit package, I want the Sunday uniform.
No, I think it's more a case of the parents really want that. Yeah, that would be my experience.
The ones I talk to cry about what they have to fundraise to get those things and how they have to buy them. So
it's been challenging. That's why I'm here. Yeah. That's why because it is very taxing on parents. And I just gone through. My daughter's a senior this year in Anderson, and I went through a really rough week of powder puff and cap and gown and the limo for homecoming and the dress alteration, and it just keeps going. And then, I have gymnastics today, and then it just keeps going and going. Right. And the car needs gas to get to health occupation. So I totally relate. I'm in the same boat. It would be nice to have that relief for our parents in some areas, so that they can use those funds to take care of other things instead of fundraising for every little bit.
So if we can start putting a cycle back together, maybe
Absolutely.
we can take some of that control back. Okay,
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Cooper, sir?
Yes, if I could, thank you, Madam President. As I relate it to Ms. Willie Nelson's point of the pay-to-play budget, the way I think I've interpreted or understood that went to the general fund, which helped pay for, went to the general fund, but out of the general fund was the budget for the athletic department, which was basically getting, I'm going to say, the bare minimum to make sure that it's still operating, and that was not being used for discretionary funds for the athletic department. Is that a correct assessment?
Right, with the decision to stop the pay-to-play, that's that much less revenue that the general fund has that's being covered by the millage money. So if we spent every dime of the millage money, everything was allocated, everything was spent, we should show a net of $60,000 to replace the revenue that we're not getting by the pay-to-play.
And that's what makes up the budget.
Right.
That's what makes up, so it's already been spent.
Right.
I understand that. I'm saying is that is in the athletic department's budget, he doesn't have a line item that says discretionary fund that would have been coming from either the millage or the pay-to-play. Is that what I'm understanding, is that there wasn't? And they're asking for additional millage money for that discretionary spend.
Right.
So it's to Willie Nelson's point is that the spirit of the pay-to-play was to give you discretionary funds, but it wasn't ever really being used for that. It was just being part of the minimum budget necessary to operate the athletic department.
I don't believe that the spirit was ever to provide anything for the athletic department. Wow. To go back, there was a time when I know that a previous superintendent said, we need this money and it's going to go toward these earmarked things, and that was never the case. Those decisions such as pay to play, that was just one of many strategies to try to capture additional funds for whatever we needed it for. It has been talked about as if it supplemented the athletic budget, but that never really happened. There's no direct line to athletics. I know some groups were told it pays for transportation, and it didn't.
There's an outline that we had when we spoke about it, and it was when you gave your presentation, and it said this portion of the general fund may be used to help support athletics, and it may also go to other things. Well, it didn't say it was specifically for, and that's not the point. I hope that, I wasn't trying to say that I think that $60,000 is also part. It just said that in case of emergency, it was there for that.
Actually, the history of the athletic fund was that it was its own special revenue fund.
Right.
Just like food service, latchkey. And in that fund was all of the expenditures for the athletic budget, the pay-to-play, and the fees. They
receipts.
get the
Gate
gate
receipts.
receipts. And when you looked at that, the subsidy by the general fund was so great that it really didn't qualify as a special revenue fund. So probably about at least 10 years ago, the Michigan Department of Education said, you're no longer recognizing athletics as a special revenue fund because it is not self-sustaining. It's nowhere close to being self-sustaining. So all that activity got transferred to the general fund. So you don't see what's actually the corresponding, what revenue there is for the athletics. You don't see it all together anymore. But, and it's in the general fund. So it's not clear that it's for athletics, and to an extent, it blends in with the other revenue. But it came from the athletic fund, and that's how those pieces are put together on the revenue side and the expenditure side.
So to my point is that as we're talking and discussing about an increase of millage spend, it would become a discretionary money line item on the athletic budget, and it wouldn't be going to some general fund that would cover the general bare bones of as that implication was related or understanding of the pay-to-play.
No,
That's all I'm getting
we are
at.
proposing for, the current budget covers the, what we've already gone over. This is to increase discretionary spending that could be for transportation, could be for the consumable equipment, could be for.
Those four areas: transportation, equipment replacement, equipment maintenance, and supplies. Those are the four that I had some discretion over. And right now, it's just transportation. And then, I mean, there is just it's so small you can't even really count it. As far as some items that we've had to purchase, like I had to buy a basketball hoop because ours was hanging down, things like that. But very, very few items over the last 3, 4, 5 years. So yeah, that's what we're looking is to those line items to allocate money in those areas so that we could actually buy the things that the parents and the boosters are now paying for. And then reestablish term and entry fees and the awards. I'd like the awards to come back under us to purchase those again, and then the term and entry fees, so that all those teams can go without having to use most of their fundraising money to pay for a term and entry fee. That's just tough.
Then separate from this $100,000 is the athletic athletic trainer, correct?
Yeah, that's a separate
So that's
item.
separate from
That's
this as well.
a separate salary.
So
And
in
that's for
our
posting.
accounting records, actually, two things will happen. The $100,000 would be part of the athletic budget, and then would also have a separate cost code at the end that would be tied to the millage money. So I can run the reports two ways. One's to show the total spending under athletics, including the $100,000, and another report that shows how much of our enhancement millage revenue, how it's being spent. So if that
I
helps.
kind of like to see it separate. That's what I was asking about, to see what the purchases are, because it's out of our control at that point, so, we want to know.
Well, we're
or I would like to-
required, it's for transportation, the different function codes that are in the budget, no matter how it's being funded, transportation still has to be under 271. But there's different parts of the account number or different responsibility codes that we can pull that together, just like his athletic budget is under 293, but I can take the athletic transportation and I can take his other athletic expenditures, and based on his responsibility code, pull those together to show what the total athletic cost is.
And when the money is say for instance it's supplies and we're buying balls for 7th grade baseball versus 9th grade or JV or varsity, the amount will be allocated in each area, so you can see how much was spent specifically on 7th grade baseball and how much of the balls were used for JV and varsity, what have you. So all those are available, but so it comes from the one pot, but then it's placed into the area that actually is receiving the items and we're spending it on.
Okay.
So that'll always be available to you at any time.
And you've been tracking it that way for a long time
Mhm.
on their own athletic spreadsheets.
Do we get a annual budget from you, or is it, how often do we get that budget?
Well,
Do we
you,
get to-
you don't. You approve the whole budget, which is
Mm-hmm.
the whole amount. So anytime that you want to see detailed information about how curriculum money is spent or how maintenance money is spent or any of that, you would have to request from us and let us know that you want to look at a particular spending
Yeah.
run.
Okay, because I would like to see, the budgets that if we approve for the curriculum, maintenance, and athletics, see what's being spent and kind of monitor ourselves to see what the millage money is going towards.
One possibility would be that those are, we're moving into the director reports, and I've put out the calendar for everybody. When those people are ready to do their annual report to you, and the board had said that, you would submit questions to me, I would just recommend that at that point you would say, can you supply, and I don't know at a presentation if we're going to go into that level of detail, but then they could supply the information to me, and I can at least put it into the
Yeah, just
folder
the
for you so that
information
you would
is
have it.
fine. Yeah.
You're just looking for the detail as
Right.
it relates to the millage.
Yeah.
I think that's something Teresa's already tracking.
Right.
She doesn't want all the drill down, just the drill down that relates to the millage spending, which I think.
Right.
So I can run reports that shows
Yeah,
you
that'll-
in
that'll be
total
good.
by account number, and then I can provide you with the detail of those account numbers to show you exactly the transactions that have gone to those accounts.
That's good. That's perfect.
And we've seen that before. I know you've given that to us before.
Yeah. And with athletics and the way I budget, not a penny of it gets spent without it coming through my office. So coaches don't get $5,000 or $10,000 to spend on whatever they want. They come with their requests and needs, and we sit down and we have a discussion about what's needed and necessary, and we go from there so that all the kids can benefit and get what they need based on what they're trying to accomplish. But they just don't have money to say, okay, we've got $10,000. What do we want? Doesn't work that way. It never has, never will. That's not a good way to make sure all the things that we need are able to be purchased. It's better to go by needs on an individual basis.
Okay, so we had a discussion about the trainer, and it was a, pretty substantive discussion. So would we have to request that separate from this budget?
Well, you already approved that, and that's been posted.
Oh.
That job has been posted.
Yes.
So when I brought that whole package by consensus, the board approved all of my proposals with the exception of you had additional questions for the athletics. So all of that is in the works. So that would be my question at the end of this discussion tonight as to whether or not you're prepared by consensus to make a decision about the proposal to add discretionary funds to the athletic budget, or if I bring that back on the 26th, I would request a direction from the board on that one.
Okay, so are there any other questions? Neil?
Yes, I was just wondering, is there a coordination between the different booster clubs for plans for sharing the concession machines and?
The machines in the school?
Yes, in the school and like to,
those are owned by the district.
Okay.
And so the vending is a building revenue source. It's not anything to do with athletics.
Okay. And then the supplies, the boosters, like for popcorn and different things like that?
Every team has their own booster club that wants one, and they have the right to run their own concessions unless they don't want to do so. If they don't want to do so, then there are plenty of groups that we have that would gladly take those over and be able to get that revenue. But all of our teams currently, and always have, they've run their own concession stands and enjoyed their own revenues to go into their budget, their booster budget, well, the student activities account for that sport.
Okay. And is there like a set thing for concession items? This is what is allowed, this is.
Yeah, there's some state laws about things that are prepared foods and things that are packaged, and so they're aware of those. We have long-time booster club members that have been involved in a long time, so they know what the regulations and rules are, what they can and can't serve. And most of the purchases are done from Sam's Club, and they get most of their stuff from there, and then they stock it on a weekly basis. They're pretty good. They're pretty accurate. They know kind of what games are going to generate what revenue, so they they're pretty good at stocking and make sure they keep their stock. And they also work with other groups too, like the Powder Puff games coming up. And sometimes they don't know exactly what to buy. So they'll work with our Booster Club presidents and they'll say, okay, here's what you're gonna buy. We'll supply it for you and then give it to you at cost. And then we'll just restock it ourselves. So a lot of times they don't have to go out and, take all these pops out and then put all this other pop in. They said, okay, use our stock. We'll charge you cost, nothing more than just cost, and then we'll restock it. And so they're pretty generous that way for these groups that are just like one time.
Our concession stands are subject to health inspection, and so both the health inspector and food service director and sometimes Nate Lay provide additional information and support to the booster groups for food safety and that sort of thing.
And that new license was just given to us this past year. They finished that inspection.
Yeah, that's,
and then
we have a new.
For the first game, I brought it out and they posted it.
We were required to replace in the indoor concession stand. We had to put in a 3-compartment sink. So those sorts of things are ongoing.
Okay. And I think you addressed it, but like a wish list for teams, like the baseball coach or the golf coach would come to you and say, this is kind of what we want. Do you have like annual meetings with them? I mean, it maybe hasn't happened in the past, but
we do.
If you have a budget, now it's like, this
yeah. Well, if they know that there's, I meet with all of my coaches annually for the beginning of the year meetings. So I meet with my fall coaches in the end of spring, beginning of fall, and then I meet with the winter coaches at the end of the fall season, and then the spring coaches, so on. We talk about budget needs, but throughout the entire year, we talk budget because a lot of their work is done in the off season with the booster clubs raising funds. When they get to the season, they have very little time to raise funds. They have to get going with the sport. So we spend a lot of time talking budget and getting items. And the off season is the best time to purchase. Like football equipment is the best time to buy that is in the spring. Right after the season's done, that's the best time to get the best deals. So there's kind of like a rhythm to that of when's the best time to get stuff. Right, a week before the season is not the time. That's when the prices skyrocket. So you want to get that stuff in advance and plan for it.
And what is the response for the elimination of pay to play? Have a lot of people?
Amazing. So many thank yous from so many parents who've been strapped, and we've seen kids that have come out that have never wanted to even try before. Like we had a need for some more 9th grade football players this year. We need to boost those numbers. We're hoping to be able to get enough so that we can continue that schedule with that group. We had 6-7 kids come out last week that probably would not have if it would have cost them a fee, an activity fee. So it was nice to see them that say, oh, I'm going to try that. I think I'll give it a shot because other than a physical, it doesn't cost them. And so very appreciative. The community, big support over that. Lots of smiles, lots of happy faces. So again, thank you for that. That was a huge move, and the people do recognize it and appreciate it. Myself included. So I have kids that play. There's one left.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a point of order as it relates to work items versus action items in the terms of what is direction. I know this was a conversation as it relates to more explanation of the spend itself, and then it's Ms. Grecian had mentioned if this was the direction that the board would want to move forward, then they would take action on that and make budget adjustments and such, and therefore, does that mean this is, and maybe this is does that mean that should be an action item for us to vote on, or does it not need to be? And the fact that it's under a work session versus an action for us to take action on it for a vote.
You've already approved the budget, and all of that money is in the budget. It was, I guess, at your request and agreement that we were going to keep track of that and that we were going to bring items for spending to you one at a time. It does not need to be an action item. The other proposals that I brought, we did in a work session, and we did it by consensus.
Okay, I guess that.
Well, the millage money is based on the general fund and can be used at the discretion of the superintendent and what the general fund needs are.
We're doing this a little differently, and we talked about this before. A lot of districts they include the millage money in the general fund, and the administration makes all of the recommendations, and it comes to the board packaged in the whole budget. At the request of this board, you really felt in order to make sure that the community was aware of the spending of the millage money and that it was being tracked in a different way. We've done this process so far. So it's not required to be an action item. If much like, we've talked before about the board took action on limiting the athletic budget, even though from year to year that wasn't binding. That wasn't something that really could be done. It was just an agreement on this board. So if you as a board want to make these all action items, you certainly can. We have already approved by consensus some of the others.
I'm just saying that it seems like, since we've already approved the budget, and it doesn't really need to be an agreement by consensus either. It's still real, it's just, we just want to see the transparent reporting of it, but it's already been approved. And that's kind of what my point was, is that we don't need a consensus. We don't need an approval on that. That really is the discretion of the superintendent. So it's just that we're not looking for that in this, and not trying to think that work session items should be action items and voting with it. That's all I'm getting at in terms of a vote.
This was really an agreement among all of us that we wanted to do this a little differently, because right now, all of the millage money that could be collected for this year would just, if we didn't spend any of it, it would end up in the increased fund balance. So, because we didn't specifically budget these things.
It's just a point of operations, that's all.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so do you want to have a consensus from the board so you can?
Absolutely.
Okay,
If you're comfortable, giving the nod to us establishing this budget, then this is a great time. Okay. If you want, if there's a reason to put it onto a different meeting, I just need to know that.
This is fine, and we'll start with Neil.
I guess
Go ahead.
maybe an objection to it would be the.
I was a yes before and a yes now.
Thank you.
Mr. Estheimer?
Yeah, I agree to that.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
I fully support it.
I have no objection.
No objections.
No objections, and we appreciate you coming in tonight just to kind of do some follow-up questions.
Anytime. Yeah, if you have any questions, if you have some rumors, some things you don't understand, doesn't make sense, please call me anytime. I'd be glad to appear and help add some clarity to whatever may come up throughout the year.
Thank you for the information.
And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is student body representatives.
I wanted to come back to this just quickly because there was a lengthy discussion and one that I certainly appreciated about going forward this year to try to get some additional student comment and representatives in front of the board. And when I went back through my notes, there was a conversation about this could perhaps replace the student representatives. You have a board policy that requires that we do this. And so as I was just sort of reviewing the board policies as I do to find out, okay, what reports am I supposed to be doing this year, just doing my own check, and I was reminded that this board policy is there, and because of that conversation about other groups coming, I had not pursued this yet. So this is a conversation for me to get clarification from the board. Do you, is it your intention to eliminate this policy and for me to proceed with trying to get that rotating group of many students for many reasons doing presentations, or do you want me to pursue, as we've done the last couple years, and get representatives from Anderson and Asher are all that are required from the board policy?
And initially, that was what we discussed on the policy committee with those, with that policy when we created it. So we made sure we had those representatives, but in addition, just to have support from other schools, we just requested it as needed, or if we wanted it. So if the board thinks that we would want additional people from all the buildings, from Davidson or the elementary schools, we could do that.
One of my concerns now is becoming time. We continue to have a pretty hefty action agenda. You're now going to be, you're going to have many more directors in front of you on a regular basis as requested, and we're going to have student representatives, and then if I add all of those other groups, I'm just concerned about time, and I don't want to prioritize on my own. So that's why I'm bringing it back to you.
If I can make a recommendation, I'd like to go with what we normally do with the Asher and the Beacon. I don't think Beacon is in there. Is it in the policy?
Your policy only addresses the high school and Asher.
Okay, but normally the board likes to hear Beacon as well. So if we could just do the high school and Asher, and then any other representatives as the year goes by, we can request it or bring it if they want someone special or in particular. But I think just those three.
Well, last year we invited Beacon and Davidson. Beacon is a little more challenging because so many of those students don't live in Southgate, and so from year to year I may or may not have somebody to do that. Davidson has, through their student council, they found representatives. So we did always Asher, always the high school, because that's in your board policy, and then we alternated between Beacon and Davidson. But again, I go back to a rich conversation that included many groups from many venues coming and reporting to the board, and I'm not sure how you vision that working alongside of the regular board representatives.
Madam President?
Ms. Reed?
I know that we've struggled with this for a few years. I would just like to see any student representative from any school come and give us a little information about what's happening at their building. I think that it's difficult when we have it consistently on our agenda, and I think that they're so busy. The juniors and the seniors are so busy, and the few that participate have other things going on, and we're only here for about 20% of the meetings. I think it was great when we had, Beacon, Asher's always wonderful, but it was really good to hear from the junior high students that came in and just kind of said, this is where we're at or what we're doing. So I don't know if we want to just move forward and say, okay, let's do it as we have to save time, as Ms. Cretion said, and then revamp and review this and say, okay, how about we try and open this up to the Southgate student body as a whole and rotate, so that it's not all the same kids. We're not always hearing about when homecoming is going to be. We're not always hearing about what games won, but we might hear about the mother-son movie night at Brogan or something like that. So I would like to hear a variety of kids, but I don't want to add more to how we have to roll that out right now.
One possibility would be if the board wants to send this to the policy committee and change the board policy and just change the language to a rotating schedule of all the buildings, that they come as a student representative and report. That would be I think very manageable, because I can send out a calendar and let the buildings sign up. I think that would be easy and would give us at least more variety and is a little more manageable than what we talked about a few months ago.
It would be more like a family feel, I think, too. So I like that part of it.
Madam President.
Mr. Craig first.
I agree with that. I think it would be good to have, multiple people have opportunity to come in, but I wonder if we're not overthinking this too much. I mean, if you look at this policy, it basically says we shall have 2 representatives from the high school too. That means not may, shall. So I question if we really want to have a policy. And in this policy, it doesn't just say they show up, say 2 things about the school, and then they're quiet. This policy has them involved in the meeting, attending committees, participating in the discussion. We've never had that in the time I've been involved. They've never participated in the discussion or been part of it. So do we really need to have this policy anymore? I guess that would be my first question for the policy committee. And we have this item on the agenda, it's already there, and it's called public comment, that any student can show up and talk about whatever they want to talk about. We can invite them to any time. So I wonder if we're not creating.
Well, you can eliminate this policy and just direct me to get students to come in participate.
Yeah, as they want to show up, they can show up at public comment. It's completely underutilized in the time I've been here, and they can show up and they can discuss whatever they want.
Here's the difference. If everybody knows you can come and make public comment, or let's say the principal of each building, and it rotates, gets to say, hey, you know what? The school board would like to hear from you. Jason, do you think you could come and bring your mom and dad and you can open us up like we used to do with the child that opened with the pledge, and tell us what you like about your school and how's recess going? Is lunch good? which favorite, just to have that. I think it's important for parents to see that. I think it's important for potential parents to see that. And I think it's a way to engage and get kids involved and know what the entire process is, not just the classroom.
And we can offer that, we can extend that out, but we've already got a spot on the agenda for it.
So in the spirit of that policy, when we did create it, we wanted to have a person here all the time who is dedicated to showing us what, or telling us everything that's happening. Definitely for sure, Anderson, and then Asher. And then our hope was to have a little bit of everything from all the buildings, just to be fair.
Right.
So we can take a look at that and revisit that in the policy committee.
So if you are agreeable, I'm going to not enact this policy right now and let this go back to the policy committee. And in the meantime, I am going to structure some invitations to the buildings to come and begin doing a more varied report to the board in terms of student representation. Is that agreeable?
I'm good with that.
I'm good.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think to Mr. Craig's point, if it's early on, then we don't have to worry so much about the timing of the younger elementary students, if they can come and hit us right at 7:15 or something.
I will absolutely do that. Thank you.
And then if there's alternates in case someone can't make it, because a lot of times there's situations where they don't show up. So if we can have an alternate too.
If we have a building that commits, I guarantee you somebody will be here.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we're going to move that student representative information to the policy committee, and we'll bring you back some information. Okay, moving on to the branding. Mr. Cooper, do you want to start that?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the branding standards as it relates to the district, and I don't know if there's any, I think about my corporate background as it relates to branding standards as how you use logos, colors, images, icons, graphics, where you are, fonts, and we talk a little bit about the STA, the logo that's on the athletics. My question is a broader question, is we as a department, is there anything written down, is there anything that discusses icons, emblems, logos, colors for the districts, for the school or schools, defined mascots? I know we're the Titans, but in my past, it used to be, I see that on the website, there's Titans for the elementary schools. The past, it wasn't. They have different emblems for the elementary schools than they do for the high school. I've seen crests, I've seen swords, I've seen just the STA, I've seen just Titans, I've seen a different logo on the website as I do on the hockey jerseys, as I do on the football jerseys. Is there a brand standard that is out there for the district and for the schools or school? And has there been an effort with that? And if there is, I'm not aware of it, or I don't know if it's being followed, for websites, for social media, for newsletters, flyers, schedules, the branding location, letterhead, things like that. It's part of the marketing of the district, and I just don't know if there's been an effort to think through that aspect of it.
To some extent, yes. But am I prepared to answer many of those questions tonight? I could answer some of them off the cuff. I always prefer to have an opportunity to get a little prepared. So, for instance, we have approved district logos. There is a board policy that talks about who may use the logo and under what circumstances. So there's some of that. There are some things in administrative regulations. The decision to move all of the elementary mascots to the Titans was made by my predecessor. Much of the things that you've seen out and around in the building are past, but we don't remove those. You're seeing the history of the district in many instances. So I think rather than just try to do an off-the-cuff response, I would say if you can kind of send me the list of questions, if the board is agreeable that this is an investigation that you're interested in, then I can certainly do some research and bring some kind of information back to you. But I would invite a discussion by the full board.
So you're asking if there's a policy on the emblems and?
Not necessarily a policy.
Madam President, can I just maybe to clarify? So what Ms. Cretion was saying is right before she became superintendent, each elementary school kind of had their own mascot. We decided we were all going to be Titans, so we all became Titans. But in each building, they still have a remnant of what their old mascot was. Are you asking to suggest that we create a boilerplate of all of our branding and have that be consistent across the board?
The reason I bring this up is very selfishly about the concept of marketing and the marketing of the district and identifying and solidifying the brand of the district as potentially a board goal as we start doing those SMART statements. And I was curious about what is the status that we have around understanding exactly what our brand is in terms of imagery. And I'm trying to understand what that is, and it might be part of what I and Tim might be able to craft as our part of our goal, at least for now, around the marketing aspect of, can we solidify what is our brand and what do we look like and do we look consistent? And by defining that as a starter, I'm not saying we have to make changes at this point. I'm just saying, can we just define it?
No, I agree. I think that.
And that's where my question was, very selfishly, as it relates to that SMART goal, where are we with that? And I just don't know. And it was just for some discussion to bring up for us to kind of give direction. I was like, can you help me figure that out? You know?
Well, as you mentioned that in the policy committee, we're looking up, we were working on the logo policy, and I did some research, and some of the other policies of other districts are their emblem and what they are and how they're used and, who can use it. So, that kind of fits along that line.
So I think about, and it's hard to say with colleges because I'm sure they have them full marketing camp, but if I think about the Michigan State University, it's a block letter S that is green and white. There's no question.
Yes. Right.
You know exactly what the Sparty looks like. They have two different styles of it.
And there's a feel. There's
a feel. There's an emblem. There's with U of M, it's a big block letter M. It's outlined. It is, and you have the positive and the negative, whether it's blue or yellow, or maize, excuse me. So there's definite standards as related to it. And I'm just curious, do we have that type of rigor as it relates to our brand?
I did look up, there are several other districts that outline even the template color. So it would be like D21740 is their version of blue, and how thickness of the font and things. And we had a little bit of that conversation, but that would be an interesting work group. And I would be all for having a goal for this board to have that be something that is a consistent and that would be made to move forward.
So again, it's a variety of answers to a lot of questions. We do have approved logos. There are some policies. There is some history. We do have specific colors. We have, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but there's a paint color and a paint number that goes with. Okay, he's going to know that. Yes, we have some of that. Do we have anywhere near the rigor of any college? No, we don't. And again, there has definitely been a movement in that direction, I think started by the gradual elimination of the elementary mascots. So again, you see a lot of things that are historically accurate but are no longer a part of the branding that we've been using to date. So maybe depending on what direction you want to go in relationship to gathering some information about a board goal, I can meet with any one of you or group of you and just share what information I have and show you where some of the board policies are. It would probably require some historical background that I don't have, and go from there. So it's a lot of, there's not a simple answer to that one.
Sounds like Jason's eager to be.
To take that on.
And I'm
if there is interest in this as a board goal, I will start with Mr. Koopser, and we will meet, and I will give him as much information as I can.
As we decide what we're going to do with the board goals as it relates around marketing.
Gotcha.
That'd be fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Support.
Thank you.
And a point of order, just because this has been for a long time, and I don't want to get caught on this, the board needs to vote on adjourning the meeting so that we can never be accused of remaining in an open meeting when you leave here and we didn't properly adjourn.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Just
You
a
can
vote.
do a majority vote.
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One of my charter schools, they actually have a
Thank you.
boilerplate with a checklist